Good morning, everyone. This is my topic for today, climate action at the community level. I want to start with my story about how I got into this work in the first place. Then I'll give you an overview of the organization that I work for. And I want to then get specifically into our Color Your Community Green program, which I think will be relevant for all of you. And I also want to leave you with some ways that you can make an impact on this global issue by taking action right at the local level, that is, to address climate change. And like I said, have some time for questions and hopefully for answers at the end. For telling you my story, I'm going to take you back a few years back. This is me right in the middle of that picture with my parents and my sisters in the Swilberg neighborhood in the city of Rochester. That's the backyard of the house where I grew up. You can maybe see in the background there's a tree house and then some canoes on a rack beneath that. But that is just one representation of how the outdoors, nature, climbing trees, the environment was something that was always part of my life and something that my parents instilled in me. And to go along with that, I think the importance of community and of our neighborhood and knowing our neighbors, being involved with our neighborhood association, going to participate in community events, that was also very important for us too. Something my parents really valued and instilled that in me as a value. So that's been something that's with me my whole life, valuing nature, valuing community and the people around me. Now, fast forward a few years, and here's me back in 2008 with some neighbors in a different part of the world. These are not my next door neighbors here in Rochester, but neighbors when I was living on the island of Abeyang in the Republic of Kiribati, which I'll tell you more about that.
The Republic.
And we were digging up taro root for a big birthday celebration for a neighbor. We were all helping out with that, but I ended up there in 2008, and I'll tell you more about that. But that and the first photo and all my experiences in between have led me to where I am now and doing the work that I do now with the Climate Solutions Accelerator and with Color Your Community Green, where we work with people in their communities and try to connect people with others in their community so that they can take action to address climate change. As I mentioned, back in 2008, actually from 2006 until 2008, I was living in the Republic of Kiribati, which is pretty far from here. It's a nation made up of 33 islands in the Central Pacific Ocean. The island of Abeyang, where I lived, is in that satellite image on the right. It's the island on the top. And these islands are coral atolls, so they're very thin strips of land in the middle of the ocean. Here's a photo I took when I was on the plane starting the descent to the island where I'd be living for a couple years and working. And that's how they look. Very thin, low lying, and just in this huge expansive ocean, all these thin little islands. And there are also a lot of people on those islands. I was doing health and community development work with the United States Peace Corps. That included a lot of different projects. The goal was overall was to work together with people in my community to develop projects to address community needs and to help the community develop, to work with youth especially, and also different groups of people in my village and on my island. As a few examples listed here, we did a life skills workshop for youth on the island. This is the photo or a photo from that workshop that we did. We had a home gardening project. We started an exercise club and a number of other different clubs with the village welfare group where I lived. And the other members of the group were just folks who lived in the village and wanted to promote health and well being of other folks in the village. And we just came up with different projects to do. One other project, and one that really stood out to me when I was on Abayang in Kiribati was a water and sanitation survey. This was a project that came about because there were some nursing students finishing up their nursing program on the island, and they came and asked me if I could help them with doing this capstone project. And what they were proposing to do was a survey of all the households in the village where we lived to learn about the situation in regards to water and sanitation and other maybe health related issues in their homes. We came up with a set of questions, and then together we went to every single household in the village and spoke with people there and learned a lot of different things about households and where people were living in the village. The biggest finding that stood out was that about half of the households in our village had wells that were brackish, meaning that the water was becoming, or already was, salty. And that's due to the salt water intruding into the freshwater lens in Kiribati. This issue is not just a problem in that village, but actually all over the island and throughout the country. This is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And even back in 2008, when we did this, it was already a problem for a lot of the people there. And this is closely connected to climate change because as our climate is changing, as our atmosphere and our ocean is warming, that's causing the ocean level to rise, and that's making the salt water intrude into the freshwater lens. And for people that depend on groundwater, makes things very difficult. Here are some photos from my island to show how people are dealing with this challenge there, because the people there are very resilient, very resourceful, and they've developed systems for how they can deal with this brackish groundwater problem. On the left-hand side, those two photos show a pumping system that people have developed where if they find a well that is fresher than the other ones nearby, they'll connect these long plastic pipes to that well, and then people will, by hand, pump that water to their home. Another very fortunate resource people have are rainwater tanks, and you can see that in the bottom right. Most of these are large plastic tanks that have been donated by aid organizations in other countries, especially Taiwan, China, Australia, and New Zealand. And then people will set up rainwater catchment systems for collecting the rainwater. So although most of the well water is brackish now, fortunately, most people have rainwater they can use for drinking, but for bathing, for washing clothes, for other uses, they're usually still using that brackish well water, which is not great. If you've ever tried taking a bath in the ocean, you'll probably know that's not the best for having a nice clean feel afterward. And also, if there are ever periods of drought where the rainwater tanks go empty, then people are forced to walk long distances to try to find a well in between villages with fresh water and then carry all that water back to their home. So even with the rainwater tanks, it's still a problem. In addition to impacting the water supply, climate change is having an effect on the food supply across the islands of Kiribati. On the left hand, you'll see my neighbors there from the photo earlier in a pit of swamp taro. Now they dig these pits deep into the ground so that they go into the water table, and then the pit fills up with this mucky, muddy water, which is great for growing this plant unless that water is salty. And when it becomes too salty, the plants actually die or produce less before that. And this is one of the staple crops people depend on in Kiribati, the taro root. Other main crops people depend on: breadfruit, that's in the top right here, coconuts, bottom right, and both breadfruit and coconut trees and other plants people depend on become less productive when the soil salinity increases, and that's also happening because of the saltwater intrusion. Now, when the soil gets too bad, all the coconut trees just die, like here. Oh, this was not just from the saltwater intruding from below, but this is actually a case where the sea came over the land from above. And this is another village on the island where I live, where they had to move most of the houses in the village because of the water coming in and covering the ground at high tide, the coconut trees dying, and they had to move to a place where the land was a little bit higher. Now, if you look in the background of this photo, you can see there's still a building there because that's their one large meeting hall for the village, and they left that one there. But all the houses that used to be nearby to that, they moved them because of the erosion that was happening there. I mentioned the high tides. What happens is a couple times a year, they have what are called king tides, which are higher than normal high tides. And in a lot of places around Kiribati, whenever the king tides come in, people are just living with homes, schools, businesses that are just flooded out for a few days during those high tides. And they deal with it. The kids actually have fun getting to play in the water all the time. But you have the animals that people raise there that are underwater. When you have houses, schools that are underwater, it's certainly not a good situation, but it's something people have to deal with increasingly. People have developed some ways to deal with the higher ocean and to try to prevent erosion. At the bottom right, you can see a seawall that people are building. And these can be helpful temporarily, but it's not a long term solution by any means because it's only a matter of time before the ocean erodes those seawalls and then they have to build it again. But the other problem with this is that if one person builds a seawall, which redirects the water, that could go to the next door person who might not have a seawall, and then it's even worse there. So that's not a perfect solution by any means. Here's a causeway, and a lot of the islands of Kiribati are actually chains of small islets connected by these causeways. Here are a couple of my friends. This was in a different village where I lived briefly, but just wanted to show how these causeways look. But what happens is whenever there is stormy weather, higher winds coinciding with higher tides, these causeways just get battered by the ocean, and it's only a matter of time before they start looking like this and then have to be repaired. And as the ocean rises, it just makes it harder and harder, and they continually have to rebuild these causeways between the villages. Here's an article from a few years ago from the Guardian, but I remember seeing this come up, and this was after an IPCC report, that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which comes out with reports periodically about the impacts of climate change and the predicted future impacts, looking at the rate at which our world is warming. And this was one when they predicted or said it was possible for entire countries to be lost within this century. And right at the top is a picture of Tarawa, which is the capital island of Kiribati, where I spent plenty of time. And when I saw this article, I instantly recognized the island, and I knew this was one that they were talking about. When folks talk about climate change as an existential issue, I think this is an example of just how existential it is because we're talking about the existence of countries where an entire country may have to be abandoned because of the impacts of climate change. So the existence of the country, and then just considering when all the people are forced to move elsewhere, what's that going to happen? What's going to happen with their language, with their culture? I think this is really illustrative of how climate change is an existential threat. Now, for me, having lived in Kiribati for 2 years and now being very closely connected with the people there, it's a strong motivation for me to get involved with taking action on climate change. My wife is from Kiribati, so everyone on, or just about everyone on her side of the family is still there, although she and I and our two kids live here in Rochester now. The left-hand side is a picture of us when we went back to visit in 2023. On the right-hand side is a picture of my daughter and her cousin a few years before that. I think that was from around 2014 when we had gone to visit then. But it's very strong motivation when I think of my family in Kiribati. And really, when I think of the injustice of it, how you have a people, beautiful islands, they have such a welcoming, beautiful, friendly culture. And considering they have done next to nothing to cause climate change in terms of emitting the greenhouse gases that are causing climate change, yet they are the ones who may lose their entire country, all of their islands, because of climate change. It's a very serious injustice, in my opinion, and it's strong motivation for me to want to do something about it. There are plenty of people from the Pacific Islands, not just Kiribati, but other Pacific Island nations who are trying to do something about climate change and who are fighting back. And the slogan is, "We are not drowning, we are fighting." This photo is of a group of people in Tokelau who are part of the Pacific Climate Warriors. And there are people from Kiribati from all over the Pacific who are part of this advocacy group calling for stronger global action to address climate change. Back in 2014, the Pacific Climate Warriors, along with people from all over the world, including a lot of other frontline communities, not just Pacific Islanders, but other folks, indigenous people, and other groups who are on the front lines of climate change in terms of being the first ones to experience the serious impacts and living in places where climate change was an existential threat. Those folks all marched at the front of this march in New York City back in September of 2014. In total, there were estimated to be about 400,000 people who participated in this march going through the streets of Manhattan. And those people included me and my wife and our daughter, who was the one riding in the stroller. She was only about 1.5, or maybe almost 2 years old when we did this march. This is something I got involved with back in 2014 because I was thinking about climate change and what can I do? How can I get more involved in taking action on this issue? And then I heard about this march, heard about other people from Kiribati who were participating. So we went, my wife and I and our daughter, to march with them, as well as other Pacific climate warriors. The guy in that top right photo holding the sign, he's from Vanuatu, and there were folks from the Marshall Islands, from all over the Pacific, marching together right near the front of this march. Now, that march was also an important moment in the history of our local climate movement because that sparked the birth of the Rochester People's Climate Coalition. Leading up to the People's Climate March in New York City, there were a group of organizations, more than 30 of them, who were concerned about climate change, wanted to go to this march and pool their resources to get a couple buses to send people from Rochester to Manhattan to participate in the march. Then afterward, they decided that that went well. It worked well to work together, and they thought they should continue working together. This included organizations like the Sierra Club, Citizens Climate Lobby, Mothers Out Front, and others. And that was the birth of RPCC. On the right hand side, you see us doing a press conference, and I was there for that. That's me in the white shirt in the middle there. We held a press conference on front of Rochester City Hall leading up to the march to call attention to it and this to bring together the people who represented the groups that were part of our coalition. RPCC grew and changed as the years passed. It became incorporated in a 501c3 in 2017, then started hiring staff the year after. Then in 2020, we changed our name to the Climate Solutions Accelerator of the Genesee Finger Lakes region. So originally the Rochester People's Climate Coalition, then became the Accelerator 5 years ago now in 2020. Different reasons for that. The main ones being that we really wanted to put a focus on solutions and how we are going to focus on moving forward solutions. And also that we wanted to take more of a regional approach rather than just focusing on the city of Rochester. So we became the Climate Solutions Accelerator of the Genesee Finger Lakes region back in 2020. Now, our mission is to create a healthier, more equitable, and regenerative community by catalyzing local efforts to eliminate greenhouse gas emissions and address the effects of climate change. We recognize that we can't do it all on our own, certainly not with just our staff, but even with the volunteers involved in the organization. This is such a big problem. We can't do it on our own. So we really have to see how we can catalyze other efforts and how we can work together and collaborate with other people and organizations. So that's how we're going about doing the work. And hopefully that will lead us to achieving our vision, which is a thriving region on a healthy planet, achieved through bold systemic climate solutions that promote prosperity and security for all. We value being inclusive, nonpartisan, solutions focused, collaborative, transparent, scientifically informed, and committed to social, racial, economic, environmental, and intergenerational justice. And the way we are trying to bring about change, the way we go about our work is by welcoming, inspiring, convening, equipping, incubating, as far as trying to take a good idea and helping it grow into something bigger, advocating for the change we need, especially at the policy level, making sure that we are targeting the system, although any type of action on climate change is valuable. We really want to put an emphasis on those high impact solutions that are going to bring systems level, large scale change. And then we want to make sure we measure what we are doing and to see how effective we are and where we need to change and make adjustments. Our main programs that we have are listed here. I'll start with the collective impact because that is our most overarching program for the work that we do. This was something we started back in 2020, actually around the time we changed the organization name. And this collective impact model is the idea that for big, complicated problems that can't really be solved by any single organization or even within a single sector, it's most effective to bring together people who are working in different sectors and align their actions to achieve change more successfully. Not asking people to go outside of the work that they're doing, but just to have everyone going in the same direction. So the people who are working on transportation and the people who are working on housing and people in agriculture, they don't need to start doing something different, but if they can think of their work, how it relates to work in other areas and all be going in the same direction, that's how we can more effectively bring about change. Now, through this collective impact initiative, we launched our Genesee Finger Lakes Climate Action Strategy back in 2022, and that has been our North Star, as we call it, our guiding star for our work, with it influencing all of our other programs that we have. Those include our Climate Advocacy Network, where we are especially focused on policy and how we can advocate for stronger policy to address climate change. We are more focused on New York State level policy than at any other level with our Climate Advocacy Network. And considering that right now it seems our federal government is not doing what it needs to do to address climate change, and I would say even going back many years, it hasn't done enough. We still see strong and very critical potential for New York State to continue to move the work forward. So working at that New York State level is very important for us. We also have our Amped Clean Energy Hub program, and this program connects residents and businesses with advice, assistance, and guidance overall on how they can improve their energy efficiency and convert to clean energy technology, whether that is insulating and weatherizing their home, getting an electric heat pump for their home, getting solar panels, getting an electric vehicle charger, getting battery storage. There's all kinds of different technologies, and we have energy advisors on our staff who will help anyone in the region with working to upgrade the building where they live or work in. Color Your Community Green is another important program of ours, not just because we're not seeing strong enough action on climate change at other levels of government, but especially considering that New York State is a home rule state and there are certain policies such as rules related to land use and zoning, rules related to buildings and codes. There are a lot of those that actually have to be decided right at the municipal government level, whether a city, town, or village. So it's an important level to work at, and that's why Color Your Community Green is an important program we have. In addition, we have our Color Your Organization Green program, which works with businesses and nonprofit organizations. We have our Color Your School Green program, which works with students, teachers, parents, anyone who's involved with the school or school district. So as you can see, we like to color a lot of things green, and I'm going to get into the Color Your Community Green program specifically in more detail. But before that, just to go over how we view our work and where it fits in terms of climate change, looking at both the causes and consequences.
Yep, I'm here.
Both of them are important
I'm listening to
for
the
for our
Sunday
organization,
Sunday forum that's on right now.
and I'm just going to ask folks to mute if there's any background noise where you are, just to make it easier for other people to hear. But when we're talking about climate change, we're really talking about human caused climate change, which is happening because of emissions of greenhouse gas emissions. You can see that at the top here. These come from our vehicles, from our power plants, factories, all kinds of different sources of these gases, the main one being carbon dioxide, but they're causing our atmosphere to warm up and causing a lot of problems, as you can see in the next level below that. Short term, these gases in our atmosphere causing poor air, water, soil quality. Longer term, we have more extreme weather events, unpredictable weather, vector-borne diseases, and then that third line, it breaks down the impacts even further in terms of how climate change affects our health, how it affects us economically, how it affects the environment and all the other animals and plants and organisms that we share the world with, how it affects the movement of people, something especially relevant here in Rochester, where we are becoming a destination for people who've been displaced by the impacts of climate change or who are choosing to move because of the impacts of climate change, and affects our food as well. So all kinds of effects, most of them negative in my opinion, that we're seeing from climate change. And our organization is trying to address both, being the effects of climate change, but also the causes and how we can reduce and eventually eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change in the first place. Now, Color Your Community Green, which I do want to speak more about, as I mentioned here, is our program through which we support local, community level teams of volunteers working to advance climate solutions right at that local or community level. Whether someone considers their community to be a city, a town, village, even a county, it's really up to them as far as how they want to organize in their community. And my job and our organization's job is to support them with their work and to provide them with tools and connections to help them become more effective. Here's a photo of a retreat we did with some of the Color Your Community Green volunteers not too long ago. I think this one was back in Mendon Ponds Park and back in the fall. And you can see me in there, as well as Andrea, another one of our staff members, and then volunteers who came to connect with each other and learn how they can do the work more effectively in their community. The history of this initiative actually predates the Climate Solutions Accelerator and RPCC. It was inspired by Color Brighton Green, and I think Robert had mentioned earlier how folks in Brighton have been very active in addressing climate change. And Color Brighton Green was established there in 2007 by a group of folks who wanted to make their town greener and more sustainable and act to improve the environment and address climate change and all of those things. Now, what our organization did more recently, going back to 2020, was to take this model that was working well in Brighton and to help it expand to other communities. and we aimed to connect and organize people to form a network of climate-focused citizen action teams across the 9-county region. So it was back in 2020 when the accelerator started helping new teams to form, modeled after Color Bright and Green. Currently, we have a network of 13 active teams spread across 5 counties of our 9-county region. We do have, of course, Color Bright and Green is still active, but we also have Color Fairport Green with folks who are both in Fairport and Parenton. We have Color Webster Green with folks both in the village and town of Webster. We have Color Rochester Green in the city of Rochester. And the stars on the map here show where the other teams are. Now, if there's not already a team in your community, there is the potential to start new teams. And another part of my job is helping new teams to get started, which we do have a few of, hoping to launch this year, and just would love to see this network grow across all of these counties. The CYCG teams work to educate and mobilize both neighbors, citizens, but also elected officials in their municipality. They identify and implement high impact campaigns that they can take on at the local level. As I mentioned earlier, we at the Accelerator really want to focus on bringing about systems level change, and that includes folks in our Color Your Community Green network. A big part of it is also developing the climate leadership of local people. These are all volunteer-led teams, and a lot of the people who got involved did not have any leadership experience when they first joined, and they may not even have seen themselves as being leaders. But through their work with Color Your Community Green, they have become very strong leaders, and it's just because it's an interest they have, a concern they have that they're very passionate about, and that's led them to jump in, get involved, and they've just grown in terms of leadership and capacity over time. So it's pretty cool to see that. And I know from the folks involved, it's really rewarding to see the fruits of their labor, as we say, and especially working at the community level, it seems we can see change come about sooner when you know your elected officials on your town board or city council, or if you don't know them personally, it's a lot easier to connect with them than it is with, say, the governor or the president. So with making those connections right at the community level and exerting more influence there, folks see that they're able to bring about that change more effectively and more efficiently. I have a few examples here of some of our teams and the work that they do, just so you can maybe better understand what are some of the possibilities. Although these are not meant to limit what the teams can do. It's up to the teams to really take on whatever projects they want to do. We do have a shared set of values we ask all the teams to uphold, but besides that, it's up to them what they want to do. So here are some members of Color West Side Green. These are folks who live in the West Side towns in Monroe County. And last fall, they got a booth at the Hilton Apple Fest, where you have at least 10,000 people, maybe tens of thousands of people going to this festival over the weekend. And they were engaging members of their community and trying to raise awareness about climate change, and also showed some examples of what you can do about it. In the top right picture, you might be able to see there's a solar panel there, which Ron, he's a tall guy here, he brought it, and he had a solar panel powering a hydroponic plant system. And they had some other different demonstrations they did just to show people of what the kind of things you can do with green energy, and how there are a lot of benefits that can come from this work. Earth Care is the team in the town of Richmond, which is where the hamlet of Honeoye is in Ontario County. And they have been doing a community gardening project where they have plots that folks in the community can pay a small fee to get a plot for the season and grow different food for themselves. But they also have food that they grow and provide to a food pantry to help with dealing with food insecurity, and also to help with improving people's diets there with having fresh or organic vegetables grown right in the community. Another fun part of their program was that they involved youth and had a 6-week summer program with youth in their community who came and learned about gardening and taking care of a garden and then got to take home food. So that was a cool part of the program they did there. Third one I want to mention is Color Penfield Green, one of the projects they've done, or actually, they've done a few of these campaigns. These are community campaigns to promote clean heating and cooling, and also a campaign to promote electric vehicles. They taught classes at the Penfield Community Center. They have had electric vehicle shows next to the Penfield Library. So a lot of it is education and helping people learn about this new technology, but also helping them find out how they can get grants or rebates or tax credits to make it more affordable to convert to a heat pump for their home or to get an EV for their next vehicle. And then through this program, their town has actually earned $60,000 of match-free grant money from New York State through the state's Clean Energy Communities program. So this was actually a collaboration between Color Penfield Green volunteers and their municipal government, where the volunteers did the work to advance climate solutions in the community, and then the municipal government, through the partnership, was able to get this grant money from New York State. So a great win-win that they have accomplished there in Penfield. Before I get to questions here, I just want to leave you with some different actions that you can take if you're so moved today or in the future, because we believe that climate solutions are for everyone, or there's something for everyone when it comes to climate solutions. Everyone can do something. No one can do everything, but everyone can do something. So here are some different options of how you can have an impact on addressing this important problem. I break it down into 4 categories: educate, collaborate, advocate, and adopt behaviors. And another part of my job is coordinating our volunteer efforts. And we have volunteer opportunities across our programs. And you can certainly get in touch with me if you're looking to volunteer. But even without having an official volunteer role, there are plenty of things you can do, hopefully just in your own home life or personal life. Starting with education, there are a lot of ways you can learn more about climate change and climate solutions on our Climate Solutions Accelerator website, which is climategfl.org. If you go to our Learn page, we have some useful resources, and these are especially related to our local area. So not just climate change in a global sense, but how it is impacting us right here in our region. Some organizations that I have found valuable for climate change information include NASA. NASA is actually the most trusted source of information across the political spectrum in our country. I found that one interesting. And their website has some great info, including some good stuff for kids there. The Climate Reality Project is another good one, as well as the United Nations website for climate change. Social media and different videos and podcasts on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. There's some useful information out there too. Of course, as with any source of information, I'd recommend you be careful about the source, because anyone could make a video and post it on YouTube. So that not every single video is a reliable source, but if you search around, you can find some good stuff there. Finally, I would invite you to attend our Climate Solutions Summit coming up next month. Great opportunity for learning more about climate change and what can be done about it. And then how to make education even more effective is to not just learn for yourself, but then share what you learn with others. A little bit more about our summit that we have coming up next month, the first weekend of April. It's on a Friday and a Saturday. Now, Friday, April 4th is our Organizations Day. Anyone is welcome to attend who will be attending representing an organization for that day. And then the Saturday is our Citizens Day, which is just any individual who's interested is welcome to attend that day. Folks can attend either of the 2 days or both. And we have some critical questions we'll be looking to address there with some great presenters and workshop facilitators. We have a special performance by Garth Fagan Dance on the Friday, and then Kit Miller, who I've found to be an amazing leader and trainer in terms of helping people develop their leadership skills and community organizing. She'll be giving the keynote on Saturday. I'm really looking forward to that, as well as the other presenters that are part of this event. Registration is open, and when I finish here, I'll share the link to that website in the chat so you can check that out if you're interested. And just a note, sponsorships and scholarships available for anyone who might be interested in being a sponsor of the event, and also anyone who would need a scholarship to attend. We don't want cost to be a barrier. We want everyone to be able to attend. After education comes collaboration in terms of how to take action. And we think that going beyond just sharing what you learn about climate change with others to then taking the next step of taking action on it with others is great whenever we see that. There are different ways that you can support the work of organizations that are trying to address climate change, whether with your time, with your talent, and or with your treasure. So lots of different ways to support, and it's not going to be the same for every person. There are lots of community organizations who are working on climate change directly, or maybe working on a very closely related issue. An important partner of ours has been Connected Communities, which works in the Beechwood and Emma neighborhoods in the city of Rochester. This is not specifically a climate concerned organization, but they are concerned about climate change and thinking about it as they work to address housing issues and other community issues. So that plenty of great organizations to support in our community, as I expect you all know. In terms of color your community green, please contact me if you're interested in joining one of those teams already in action, or if you want to start a new team. I see we have some folks who just joined before or joined after I'd asked folks where they call home. But my email is here, and I can share that in the chat afterward as well. Brady@climategfl.org. Let me know if you're interested. Advocate is next on my list. And in terms of bringing about systemic change, we believe that advocacy is crucial. And how can we get policy, especially, how can we advocate for stronger policy to address climate change? And that can involve something as simple as calling or writing to an elected representative. I actually have a quick action for you to take today if you're interested. That should only take one or 2 minutes to write to an elected representative. But it can also be with advocating to the leadership of other organizations you're involved with, participating in public hearings, attending lobby meetings with elected officials. And there are also different marches or rallies that come up over the course of the year. And the more people we can have show up for that, the stronger voice that we'll have in calling for action. Now, here's an advocacy action that you can take today if you're interested. It should only take 1 or 2 minutes, but that is to send an email to New York State legislators, being assembly members and New York State senators, to ask them to make the New York Heat Act a budget priority. And I'll post this link in the chat. We also have it at the bottom of this slide, p2a.co/en capital D capital W H1N. And I'm just, if that will look like this here. I'll post that link in the chat also. But I would invite anyone interested now to go ahead and click that and just take a minute or two to send an email to your assembly member and state senator to make the New York Heat Act a budget priority. It's pretty easy to do. You just fill out your information. You can personalize this message if you want, but you can just use it as is as well. If you want to personalize it, maybe saying a reason why this is important, why taking action on climate change is something important for you, that can be something you can include in the message there. Now, I should explain what this is in the first place. New York Heat Act is probably our biggest priority for state policy right now. HEAT stands for the Home Energy Affordable Transition Act. It would achieve multiple goals. First one, it would be lowering utility bills for low and moderate income households. it would actually cap a household's energy burden at 6%, meaning that they would not have to pay more than 6% of their monthly income on their energy bill. That's for their electric and gas utility bill. And also, it would get rid of the 100-foot rule, which right now requires any new buildings within 100 feet of a gas line to be connected to that gas line, meaning that all ratepayers are subsidizing the build out of infrastructure that is propagating the use of fossil fuels and this fracked gas especially. So those are the reasons why we really want to see this get passed. These photos are from February 4th when we had a big rally in Albany, and we have another one coming up next week, Wednesday the 19th. We will have a bus from Rochester. I'll be going, and if anyone's free and interested, you're welcome to join me. I'll also put in the chat the link to sign up for this trip. So that is coming up next week, March 19th. I will be wrapping up soon, so we have a few minutes for questions, but I want to just mention the final way I recommend folks take action is by adopting behaviors. And this is more individual or more at the household level, but this is important too. And especially if it can lead to a ripple effect by one household doing something that maybe a neighbor or friend sees, and then they do it too, and maybe it can snowball from there. So those personal household level choices are important too. It could be reducing the need for energy in one's home, whether that's through using more energy efficient appliances or LED light bulbs, that kind of thing, but also through conserving energy at home, like by lowering the temperature when it doesn't need to be so high. For anyone interested, I highly recommend you schedule an appointment with one of our Amped energy advisors so they can talk to you about how you may be able to improve the energy efficiency of your home or business and how you may be able to upgrade to clean energy technology, especially if you have an older furnace, older water heater, if you live in a home where the insulation isn't great, or maybe you don't even have insulation. They can help you through this. Their services are free. There are also grants and rebates available that can make it less expensive, even free in some cases, to get the work done on your home. So I'd highly recommend you take advantage of this program that we have. A few others is how we can use more alternative transportation methods or public transportation, ride sharing, thinking about how our diet can have less of an impact on the climate, like but integrating more plant-based foods, and also how we can divert waste, reduce, reuse, recycle, compost. So all of these are important as well. That brings me to the end. I appreciate you listening. And once again, here's my email, brady@climategfl.org. Our website is climategfl.org. Post those in the chat. And I think we have a few minutes for questions. So I'll stop sharing and I welcome any questions that you have. Yes, I think that's Bob raising his hand. Are you able to unmute, Bob?
You're muted, Bob.
Is there a button you can hit? Should be at like the bottom left of the screen, Bob, where there's a picture of a microphone. It says audio.
I got it.
There we go.
Pardon me. Thank you very much for that incredible presentation, Brady. It was very informative and incredibly well organized and well done. I really appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else does. What is forefront in my mind is recycling. A few weeks back, Jen Lunsford, the state assembly person, had a meeting that I attended, and she brought somebody who works for the counties that talked about county recycling, and it was a pretty discouraging meeting because she pointed out that we've been encouraged for years to recycle plastic, and I look at my recycling bucket at the end of every week, and the majority of what's in it is plastic, single-use plastic stuff, and she pointed out that a very small portion of that is actually recycled. she said that the clamshells and all the other stuff, even if it's a number one plastic, is not recycled. The bottles are and so forth, the containers are, but it represents a relatively small portion. That was one thing that has bugged me. And basically, she said the whole plastic coating, the recycling numbers that are put on things was basically a smokescreen by the plastics industry. And then in addition to that, she pointed out that that which is supposedly aimed at recycling, even if it's packaged, is not recycled if there happens at the moment not to be a market. In other words, the plastic producers aren't required to take that material that is actually designated to be recycled. And somebody said, well, what happens to that if there's no quote market for it? And she shrugged her shoulders and said, well, it goes to the dump. So anyhow, that's something I know it's only one dimension of what we're talking about, but it's something that a lot of us have been religiously doing for years, and it's pretty crushing to realize that basically we've been misled and lied to. So are you aware, am I on the same page as you are, Brady, with that subject?
Yes, yes, yeah, I've heard the same things that you mentioned there, and I've also felt discouraged by hearing those. For me, it re-emphasizes the importance of policy solutions in
Right.
this case. I do, I mean, I still make sure to recycle, and whenever my kids put the wrong thing in one bin or the other, I'm
Right.
like, no, this goes here, no, this goes here. And I mean, we also compost. So I think waste management is very important to be doing at the individual or household level. But I also think that considering how Coca-Cola and the plastic bottles producers years ago tried to push the burden onto the
Right.
individuals, like, oh, it's on
Right.
you to be recycling. We're just going to produce all these plastic bottles, but it's on you to be the one recycling. I think it's important that we also need to shift that, and the best way may be through policy. I think there is a New York State bill that's been proposed called like the plastic packaging and bottle bill, something like that. I don't know the exact name, but that's one that would put basically make the producers of what's going to end up being plastic waste, make them more responsible for
Yeah.
reducing that waste. So it's not just on individuals. So I do think that's a case of where
Apparently, yeah, a number of years back, there was a bill in the state assembly to increase the deposit on bottles and recyclable bottles and cans from a nickel to a dime. And it was defeated because the bottle lobby got in there, well, we don't want that. And so anyhow, it's a political issue, like you said. It's a major political issue. And um, I just think there needs to be legislation to at least require them, if the recycling centers that the government provides picks up, sorts and packages the stuff for them to recycle, that they must take it, at least take that portion of it. And there's no requirement that they do, and sometimes they don't. So it's just it's a conundrum. It really is. So yeah, the Canadians are about to start preventing the use of single-use bottles in Canada. I don't know if it's underway yet, but apparently they've passed the legislation to do that. So there's hope.
yeah, well, thank you, Bob. And I did put some links in the chat. Feel free to open any of those up. I also put my email address there. And I saw Marie sent the message. So thank you to Marie. And for anyone who sent that message. I mean, considering what Bob had said about how there are folks, lots of folks trying to introduce our policymakers to make policy, shifting things one way or another, or to preserve the status quo or to bring up something new. It really is important that we are saying, excuse me, saying what we would like to see and making sure that the people who represent us know how we feel and hold them accountable for actually representing their constituents. So I see it as 11:01. If that means we have to end, that is fine. But I'm happy to take a few more questions. Marie, I see you have your hand up.
Right, well, that, that was gonna be my question. If, people have questions, we really don't have a time limit. We could, take another 5-10 minutes. I was gonna ask you, if you could share maybe the names of some schools or churches in the area that are already working with your programs?
Yes, I know. I think it's called Mount Rise or
Mountain Rise,
Mountain Rise.
Mountain
right?
Rise. I
Good.
know they have been involved. So when I talk about one way that our organizations tries to bring about change is through incubating ideas. We have had some different organizations that have grown out of ours. One being RICA, which is Rochester Area Interfaith Climate Action. Are any of you familiar with them?
No,
Yeah, so basically people of faith for whom their faith is a important motivation for them to take action on climate change and trying to organize others who feel the same way. So especially there are different churches who are involved with that. I think Mountain Rise is one of them.
mhm,
I believe a number of folks with Spiritus Christi have been involved. The First Unitarian Church, First Universalist Church. I think Greece Baptist Church may be one. I know the United Church of Christ in Honeoye has done they've done work. I'm sure there are more, but those are the ones that come to mind first. And as far as schools, I mentioned we have that sister initiative called Color Your School Green, and we've had participations from school all over, but the ones who are more regularly attending those network meetings are folks in the Penfield School District, Brighton, and Fairport in those school districts. And then actually we also have a teacher who's in the Ithaca School District, which is just outside the region that I work in, but still close enough and still pretty relevant. I think that he's been participating, but it's incredible to hear what they've been doing in the Ithaca School District, where there's a group of high school students who has been going and speaking to the school board and advocating for the school board to do more, and they got the school board to adopt a climate action plan for the Ithaca School District, where they're changing the buildings and the bus system and all kinds of stuff, and really with a focus on climate justice. So it's been pretty cool to see what they're doing, and I'm hoping that that can be a model for what schools around here do as well.
oh, good, thank you.
Oh yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Thank you very much, Brady.
Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, thank you all for being here, Carolyn and Don. Glad you were able to join. Sorry if you missed some at the start there. And Carolyn, I saw you had a little friend with you there, so glad they made it too.
I'm in Seattle. This started very early for me.
Oh wow.
Oh, good for you. Say hello to folks for us.
Yeah,
I'll do.
hugs to
Okay,
that
I'm
baby.
going to sign off, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brady.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everybody.
Brady.
I'll stop the
Brady.
recording.